I went to a meeting in about 78 somewhere, and I don't know why I was there, but I remember meeting Carl Sagan, who said, "Why don't you do a science series for kids?" And I said to myself, what a wonderful idea. Because science is everything. I mean, so much interesting stuff you can do. So I came back. We tried to make a deal with Carl. He was not easy because he wanted ownerships and percentages and wanted to work in a way we don't work. And so we said bye-bye to him, but we were then launched on a science series for children. And that money was relatively easy to raise because you have the National Science Foundation and the Office of Education. There were many people, foundations, corporations, government agencies that were interested in public education of science. That was and is a big thing, the public education of science. And this fell into that category. Science is not even taught in schools in a regular way, so this was going to be the only science these 8 to 12-year-olds in many cases would get if we could get them to view the show. It was decided early on that we would teach everything. We wouldn't try to teach the way it might be taught in school. We wouldn't have a chemistry line and a physics line. It would be teaching showing phenomenon, showing how things work, trying to motivate kids to ask why and get into why things work the way they do. Sam Gibbon, again, was put in charge of that project, and I'm pausing to think of names here, but I'll get to it in a minute. Sam Gibbon was put in charge of this. He was so articulate and wonderful in describing what he was going to do, but he could not get it done. And he was just paralyzed in execution, but not in articulating. He got so he wanted it perfect. And I said, Sam, it's not going to be perfect. He and Dave Connell, who was working with him, eventually recommended that we abandon the project. And I said, are you telling me the Children's Television Workshop cannot do a science show for children? And so I said, I will see that this gets done. We searched then for someone we could bring in, and we found Kathy Mendoza came in, who had done science projects. I forget exactly what her background was. She knew television and she knew science. She was a 10 strike for us. And she came in and using Sam's work, so that what he had done was not in vain at all. She just took off from what he had done and created a show without a lot of Sturm and Drang, a good show. So Sam didn't quite see it. It's like discoverers who are just on the brink and they die or say, I can't find it, and someone then builds on that work and sees it right away. So 3-2-1 Contact went on the air and was very well received by everybody. These shows, these 8 to 12-year-old shows cannot build the kinds of audiences that Sesame Street has because older children do not watch educational television easily. You have to really entertain them. They have to think it's cool. And cool is not usually watching PBS. It's watching Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network or whatever. Parents may think they have some rules, but the kids are in charge. So it's very hard to get a large audience, but you can get an audience, and we did for 3-2-1 Contact. And it went on for 2 or 3 seasons. We did maybe 3 seasons of 3-2-1, repeating some and so on. How we do it is always pretty much the same. We start convening experts in the field. We hold seminars to educate the producers. We arrive at conclusions. We set goals. We do research in the field all while we're producing. We did not, with 3-2-1 Contact or Square One TV, use the educational testing service to do pre and post testing because there are technical reasons you don't do it for this kind of programming. But we did do research to find out, were they motivated? Did they understand what we were doing? Did they like it? And it, 321 was very well liked by the children that watched it. It's fun to watch. Like all of ours, not a storyline. It had, it's like a magazine show with shorter pieces.
Yes.
But it had one fictional thing in it, the Bloodhound Gang. And that was extremely popular. That ran about 5 minutes a day with a cliffhanger. It was a mystery show. And of course, science was at the bottom of the mystery, but it was a group of kid detectives that were very attractive. And the Bloodhound Gang, if we could have figured out how to do it, and we just couldn't, could have been spun off in its own right as a show, and should have been, because kids like we ended up doing something like it with the Ghost Rider years later. I think 2 or 3 years later we did Square One TV. I think it went on the air in '83. It was children as hosts. It was 3 or 4 children who I think met in a clubhouse where there were science things around, and they were interested in science, and they took you out to these adventures. I mean, one of them I remember was skydiving. Was one of the girl actors parachuted out of a plane, and that showed how wind held up parachutes. I mean, so that they really went into these adventures, with animals, with all kinds of things. And so it was done like a magazine show where the kids would start out, and then one of the kids would go on an adventure, and then another kid would go on an adventure, and each of these trips they would take you on, where there were 2 or 3 within a half hour, and then there was the Bloodhound Gang as dessert, sort of, at the end.
Altogether, the show was on the air for 12 years, but
it was not 12 new seasons.
I see.
We did about 4 seasons of that show, and then it was repeated because it was very easy for PBS to pay the residuals on that because there were no stars, so that's what kept it going. Well, there was a lot of money around for science because of the National Science Foundation and groups interested in the public understanding of science. So it was funded by a consortium interested I can't remember if a corporation was in it, but probably even a corporation was in it initially, but certainly the National Science Foundation and the Office of Education, and were what kept it going, was government and foundation money that wanted to see children understand science, who had as their primary purposes having children understand science.